Lilia Rosavelle was finally about to be sentenced. She had poisoned herself, planted a vial in my cloak, and framed me for attempted murder. Then she waited for Lucien, my former fiancé, to kill me before anyone checked the evidence. He nearly did. That was how Sabina Rosavelle died in the dating game I once played on Earth. The Villainess was condemned, the Heroine inherited everything, and Lilia received her happy ending. Then I woke inside Sabina's body. My name had been Mira. I remembered how the scene was meant to end, so I changed the glasses, sealed the waiting chamber, and copied every record. When her plan failed, Lilia finally admitted the truth. You were supposed to die before anyone checked the records. She was not sorry she tried to kill me. She was angry that I survived.
This is an original story from Keiko novel.
Chapter 1. The True Ending. Lilia stood before the royal court in silver restraints, wearing the same soft expression that had fooled everyone before. Her fine clothes were gone, but she still looked like someone waiting to be rescued. Lucien stood near the front without a sword. The court had taken it from him before the hearing. A sensible choice. Octavia waited beside the judges as House Vindex's representative. Thessa had not been allowed inside. Octavia caught my eye and gave a small nod. Still here. The judge opened the sealed order. Lady Lilia Rosavelle, you stand accused of arranging your own poisoning, falsifying commercial records, planting evidence, and conspiring to frame Lady Sabina Rosavelle for attempted murder. Whispers moved through the courtroom. Lilia lowered her head. Her shoulders shook once. It would have looked convincing if I had not seen her use the same movement before every lie. The judge waited for silence. For these crimes, the court has reached a sentence. The courtroom doors slammed open. Every guard straightened. Every noble rose. A man entered beneath the royal crest, followed by armed guards. His coat was white with gold trim, and his steps never slowed as the room bowed around him. The Crown Prince. I recognized him from official portraits and a few background scenes in the game. He had never been a romance option in any route I played, at least not one I unlocked. He ignored the judges and stopped in front of Lilia. Remove her restraints. The guard beside her froze. Your Highness, the judge said, the court has completed its investigation. I am reopening it. The evidence was witnessed by royal officials. Then they may witness it again. The key turned. Silver struck the floor. Lucien stepped forward. Lilia? She walked past him without looking back. He had abandoned Sabina for her. Defended her, raised a sword for her. He had nearly killed me because her tears mattered more than evidence. Now she passed him like something she had finished using. The Crown Prince offered his arm. Lilia placed her hand on it. Lucien stared at them. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. The Crown Prince faced the judges. Lady Lilia is now under royal protection. All records connected to this case will be sealed for independent review. The judge lowered the sentence. On what grounds? The prince looked at me. Evidence gathered by someone who benefits from the accused woman's conviction cannot be considered impartial. She poisoned herself, I said. So you claim. She confessed. After public humiliation, she said I was supposed to die. Several nobles looked at Lilia. She stood beside him with her hands folded and her eyes lowered. The prince's face did not change. People say many things under pressure. My jaw tightened. I had cellar records, route logs, neutral witnesses, a captured courier, and a servant confession. The waiting chamber had been searched and sealed before the vial appeared. He did not care. He had not come to examine the evidence. He had come to erase the result. The hearing was suspended. Royal guards began collecting the sealed files from the evidence table. Octavia stepped in front of them. Those records belong to the court. The Crown Prince faced her. House Vindex has involved itself enough. Then the records should remain visible. His gaze stayed on hers for a moment. Noted, the guards took the files. Lilia approached me while the Crown Prince spoke with the judge. You look upset, sister. You confessed. And yet I am free. For now. Her smile sharpened. You may have stopped my happy ending. She leaned close enough that no one else could hear. But the true ending has only just begun. Something heavy settled beneath my ribs. What are you talking about? Her eyes lifted toward the empty air. For 1 second, pale blue light reflected across her pupils. A system window. Not mine. Hers. You really do not know, she whispered. Know what? You broke the heroine route. Her smile widened. So the game finally came to retrieve its heroine. My breath stopped halfway in. The game had advertised one hidden romance route. A secret male lead, a so-called true ending that only opened after Sabina's death. The promotional material had hidden his face and title. Players had to complete several routes before his identity was revealed. I had never bothered. By then, I already hated Lilia too much to spend another 20 hours helping her find an even richer husband. My gaze moved past her. White coat, gold trim, royal guards waiting for his command, the crown prince. Of course. The man who had stopped her sentence was not merely protecting Lilia. He was the hidden route. Lilia had the system. She had the route I never played. For the first time since I woke inside Sabina Rosavelle's body, she knew more about the game than I did. The crown prince extended his hand. Lilia accepted it like she had always expected a throne. Before leaving, she looked back at me. You stole the ending that belonged to me, she said. Now I am going to take it back. I watched them leave together. Lucien remained behind, staring after the woman who had already replaced him. The court believed Lilia had escaped judgment. I understood something worse. The game had chosen her again. This time, I had no idea what happened next. Rain struck the palace steps outside. Carriages crowded the square while servants rushed beneath umbrellas. I stood beneath the stone arch and watched the royal carriage disappear through the gates. My fingers kept pressing against my palm, so I folded my hands behind my back. It did not help. Octavia stopped beside me. The prince never intended to examine the evidence. No. He arrived knowing what he would do. They took every court copy. Not every copy. I turned. Octavia reached inside her coat and removed a slim packet marked with my seal. You kept one. I kept 3. A breath left my nose. You continue to be attractive at inconvenient moments. Her gaze dropped to my mouth. I looked toward the rain. I knew Lilia would try to frame me, I said. I knew where, when, and how. Octavia waited. But everything after the ballroom is new. And now? Now Lilia knows something she should not know. Octavia tightened her grip on the packet. What did she mean by the heroine route? I don't know how to explain it. That is not the same as not knowing. No. Her eyes stayed on mine. You have been carrying this alone for a long time. My throat went dry. Octavia moved closer. You do not have to tell me everything today, she said. But do not lie to me. I won't. Good. Her hand closed around my wrist. Then whatever Lilia has become, you are not facing her alone. Her thumb moved once against my pulse. Rain had caught in the loose strands near her temple. She still stood straight, but her breathing had changed. I leaned forward. She met me halfway. The kiss was quiet. No court, no witnesses, no plan. Her hand moved to my jaw. Mine settled at her waist. For one moment, nothing needed to be solved. When Octavia pulled back, her breath touched my cheek. Mira. My fingers tightened against her coat. She had never called me that before. You heard Thessa? I did. That is not Sabina's name. No. Her eyes stayed on mine. Will you tell me? Not here. Octavia nodded once, then later. Movement crossed the corridor above us. Lilia stood beneath the archway. The crown prince waited ahead with his guards. She had seen us. Her gaze moved from Octavia's hand at my waist to my face. There was no shock, no disgust. She smiled. Slowly, like a lock had opened. Then she turned and followed the crown prince into the rain. The carriage door closed behind her. Octavia's hand remained against my side. What did she see? Something she thinks she can use. The carriage vanished beyond the palace gates. Lilia's smile stayed with me. She had found her next move. Chapter 2. The Crown's Husband. The royal summons arrived before breakfast. Nova brought it into my office with the expression she usually reserved for damaged cargo and dishonest merchants. The parchment described Rosavelle Express as essential commercial infrastructure affecting national security. I read that phrase twice. Yesterday, the Crown Prince had removed Lilia from a sentencing hearing. Today, he had developed a passionate interest in transportation law. Apparently, royal tyranny kept an efficient schedule. I went to the palace prepared. Ownership records, warehouse deeds, merchant contracts, foreign agreements, route licenses, royal approvals. Octavia accompanied me in formal Vindex colors. Thessa came because the summons specifically mentioned Blackwake shipping contracts, although several guards looked disappointed that this counted as a legitimate reason to admit a pirate captain. Paper had saved my life once. I had brought enough of it to bury a small government. Lilia sat beside the crown prince when we entered. No sign that yesterday she had been awaiting sentence for attempted murder. The king's illness had left most daily authority in his heir's hands for nearly a year. The prince spoke instead about Rosavelle Express, grain routes, medicine deliveries, coastal transport, foreign warehouses, and the speed with which my network carried goods and information across the kingdom. Listening to him describe my company was almost flattering until he explained why everything I had built apparently made me dangerous. House Vindex stands beside you. Captain Blackwake's fleet carries your goods. Your foreign routes operate beyond direct royal supervision. His gaze moved between Octavia and Thessa. You may take any wives permitted by law. You may not bind the kingdom's largest private network to House Vindex, and a pirate captain without royal oversight. Thessa made a quiet sound beside me. I knew that sound. It usually arrived shortly before an expensive problem. Rosavelle Express belongs to me. I placed the ownership documents before him. House Vindex owns none of it. Captain Blackwake owns none of it. Neither has authority over company decisions unless I grant it. The Crown Prince barely glanced down. He invoked an infrastructure provision allowing royal intervention, where private networks affected essential supplies or national security. I answered with the original charter. He answered with another statute. For the first time since waking as Sabina Rosavelle, my paperwork did not open the door. His solution was marriage. I had 30 days to accept a crown-approved husband who would become my primary political consort, and a state administrator. Rosavelle Express would remain legally mine. My husband would simply supervise crown contracts, strategic expansion, security arrangements, inheritance matters, and major agreements involving national infrastructure. If I refused without presenting an acceptable alternative, the crown could pursue temporary administration instead. They had invented confiscation with a wedding ceremony. Alaric rose from among the Rosavelle representatives. Your Highness, my daughter has managed the company successfully. Such an arrangement could seriously damage House Rosavelle's interests, not my freedom, not my right to refuse. House Rosavelle's interests. The prince asked whether father intended to challenge the crown's authority. Silence stretched just long enough to answer for him. Alaric sat. Across the chamber, Lilia watched me with the faintest smile. She did not need to say anything. The prince offered Octavia an easier choice. House Vindex could publicly confirm that she intended no involvement in Rosavelle affairs. Politically, it was sensible. It would weaken his argument immediately. Octavia stood. I am not here to control Lady Rosavelle's company. Several counselors relaxed. Then she added, I am here because she asked me to stand beside her. The room tightened again. When she sat, her fingers brushed mine beneath the table. She had chosen the more dangerous answer. Thessa's choice was simpler. The prince reminded her that Blackwake's pardons and commercial privileges could be reviewed if her fleet became part of a political faction opposing the crown. Will you withdraw from your contracts with Rosavelle Express? Thessa leaned back. No, he waited. That is your complete answer? She smiled. You use an impressive amount of parchment to say do what I want. I thought I'd save everyone time. I covered my mouth before anyone noticed my own smile. Then the crown introduced Lord Draven. Unfortunately, he was not old, greasy, or visibly inclined to lock women in towers. He was perhaps 30, impeccably dressed and irritatingly composed. He praised Rosavelle Express, complimented my expansion strategy, and assured the council he had no intention of interfering with daily operations. His role, he explained, would provide continuity between company and crown. Several counselors visibly relaxed. I distrusted him immediately. A cage was apparently much easier to sell when the bars had good manners. Outside the chamber, Octavia was intercepted by 2 Vindex representatives demanding an immediate meeting. Thessa caught my sleeve before I reached the stairs. 30 days, she said. Very romantic. I kept walking. I assume you'll send flowers. I was thinking explosives. Less paperwork. Her grin faded when mine did. You're not seriously considering him? I looked toward the courtyard. If one marriage protects hundreds of employees and their families, I have to consider what refusing costs them. No, Thessa stepped directly into my path, surprisingly authoritative. I'm a captain. It happens. She caught the front of my coat and pulled me closer. Lose money, lose roots, lose that ridiculous chair in your office. I don't like that chair. You glare at anyone else who sits in it. That is different. Her expression softened. You are not turning yourself into payment because some prince discovered a convenient law. Staying. beside me could cost you your pardon. Yes, your roots. Probably. Your ships. Now you're being rude, I laughed despite myself. Thessa's gaze dropped to my mouth. She slid an arm around my waist. And if the crown thinks threatening my ships will make me step away from you, they really haven't been listening. Then she kissed me. There was nothing careful about Thessa's kiss. She kissed the way she sailed, as though hesitation was simply another obstacle best ignored. My first thought was that I wanted her to do it again. My second was Octavia. That was considerably less convenient. Octavia and I had kissed. We had never defined what that meant, and we had certainly never discussed exclusivity. Apparently, my conscience had decided to begin negotiating relationship terms without consulting any of the people involved. Thessa pulled back, looking entirely too pleased. There. I stared at her. There what? Now your future husband has something accurate to worry about. Later, Draven requested a conversation in one of the palace reception rooms. Without counselors watching, his language became more precise. If we married, Blackwake would be removed from strategic routes. House Vindex would have no company authority. Crown contracts and major expansion would require his approval. My private relationships, however, were apparently none of his concern. Another husband might require exclusivity, Draven said. I would not. How fortunate for me. Lady Vindex and Captain Blackwake may remain part of your private life, provided those relationships remain politically separate from Rosavelle Express. There it was. He did not care whom I loved. He cared whether the women beside me possessed influence. Somehow that made him worse. Cruel men were easy to recognize. Draven genuinely believed he was offering me a reasonable arrangement. By the time we returned to Rosavelle Express, Nova and half the warehouse already knew about the marriage order. Well? Nova asked. Apparently I've been assigned a husband. Thessa folded her arms. Can we return him? Octavia, who had rejoined us outside, considered this with complete seriousness, preferably unopened. Before I could answer, another carriage stopped at the entrance. Draven stepped down alone, entered the public dispatch floor, and introduced himself politely to Nova. I thought it appropriate to familiarize myself with Rosavelle Express, he said. If Lady Rosavelle and I are to work together, I hope we can make the transition an easy one. Nova looked at me. I had never seen a woman request permission to commit murder entirely with her eyebrows. Draven smiled. I smiled back. Excellent, I said. Then your first lesson is that there is no transition. Chapter 3. Somewhere else. Draven did not need authority over Rosavelle Express to make himself useful to the crown. Within 3 days, 1 royal route had been suspended, 2 payments were delayed for review, and several merchants had quietly asked whether working with me would damage their government contracts. Nova kept the warehouse running while I tried every solution I knew. Private roads strengthened the accusation that I operated outside royal control. Blackwake ships risked Thessa's trading privileges. House Vindex intervention only made the supposed political alliance look more real. By the 4th rejected plan, I dropped my pen. I survived an execution, exposed a thief, and built a national company. Apparently none of that matters once the future king decides he owns the law. Thessa, who had been occupying the chair opposite my desk with very little respect for furniture, watched me. You need to leave. I stared at her. No, she rolled her eyes. For a day, Mira. Try not to turn everything into permanent exile. There was an outbound Rosavelle shipment the following morning, carried by the Nightwake to a neighboring kingdom. Rosavelle Express already traded there, so Nova could manage everything while I was gone. Thessa insisted Octavia and I come with her. On deck, she moved through the crew with effortless confidence, checking cargo, correcting routes, and shouting orders before anyone had time to argue. When she caught me watching, she grinned. Enjoying the view? I looked toward the sea. The coastline is adequate. Coward. Later, Thessa found me with a ledger open on my knees. She took it before I could stop her. You've read the same page 6 times. I told her I could move foreign warehouses, protect payroll, and shift more business abroad. She listened, then asked what I actually wanted. The answer came out before I could make it respectable. I'm tired. Thessa did not tell me to fight harder. She moved closer until our shoulders touched. Then be tired. Her hand found mine. And for once, I let someone else sit with the problem instead of solving it. The neighboring kingdom looked ordinary enough until I noticed what nobody noticed. A woman commanded the harbor guard. Another owned the warehouse beside ours. 2 noblewomen wearing matching marriage bands walked past us without attracting a glance. A merchant complained that both her wives had changed dinner plans without asking her. Thessa rested a hand against my waist as we stepped off the gangplank. Octavia's gaze dropped to it, only for a second. Then she looked toward the harbor, as though she had merely been inspecting the dock. I noticed anyway. No one else seemed to care. No one looked twice at Octavia standing beside me either. Apparently, several problems I had spent months treating as unavoidable were simply local customs with very good publicity. That evening, I stood overlooking the harbor. I could stay here. Thessa leaned against the balcony beside me. Yes, I looked at her. You're supposed to argue. Why? Because leaving sounds like surrender, she shrugged. Leaving sounds like leaving. For 1 second, pale blue light flickered across my vision. Route deviation detected. I froze. The window vanished before I could touch it. My system had not appeared since the end of the original game route. Apparently, it had not disappeared. It had simply been watching. Later, Octavia found me still staring at the docks. You are thinking about leaving. I am thinking about whether staying is stupid. With Rosavelle Express? That was the idea. Octavia's gaze moved briefly toward Thessa. Only Rosavelle Express? I looked at her. Was that jealousy? No. Very convincing. I am choosing not to answer. I smiled despite myself. Then I told her I could protect most of the international company from here. You are allowed to want to leave, she said quietly, and still decide not to. Unfortunately, she understood exactly why I had not packed yet. The Queen summoned us the next morning. She already knew Rosavelle Express through our foreign roots and made no attempt to pretend her interest was charitable. My company would benefit her kingdom. In return, she offered royal merchant status, protection for Rosavelle assets, land for an international headquarters, continued Blackwake access, and recognition of my ownership without requiring a husband to supervise it. You built something your kingdom is frightened to let you keep, she said. Mine would welcome it. For several seconds, I wanted to accept. I could move the international headquarters, protect the records, transfer enough money to keep the company alive. But Nova could not relocate an entire workforce overnight. Inland merchants could not move their shops. Families depending on medicine routes could not cross a border because I had found somewhere safer. If I leave, I said, I save part of Rosavelle Express. I'm not sure I save the people who built it. The Queen did not argue. She simply kept the offer open and promised protection for our foreign records and warehouses. Then she told me someone else had requested a meeting. Prince Elias entered through the side door. I looked at him. I came here to escape one prince. Thessa folded her arms. Technically, you succeeded. Elias did not waste time. His brother would eventually control Lilia's case, Rosavelle's appeals, and every official currently pretending to be neutral. Removing Draven would solve nothing. Help me prove my brother unfit to inherit, he said, and I will support a charter making Rosavelle Express independent from direct crown control. Thessa immediately asked the obvious question. And what stops you becoming exactly like him once you have his position? Elias answered without hesitation. Nothing, unless the charter limits me too. That got my attention. I set my conditions. No ownership in Rosavelle. No personal loyalty. Any restriction imposed on his brother would also bind Elias if he became heir. The Queen would keep copies of every agreement. He accepted all of them. I did not trust him yet, but I was beginning to believe we might be useful to each other. The safe choice was still sitting on the table in front of me. I could stay here, keep my company alive overseas, let the Crown Prince have whatever remained at home. Instead, I thought about Nova, the warehouse crews, regional drivers, merchants, and everyone who did not have a queen offering them sanctuary. I'll help you, I said. Octavia did not look surprised. Thessa only sighed. I suppose returning home quietly was never really an option. You knew me before we sailed? Elias stopped me before we left. There is one more problem. Of course there was. His brother's formal succession confirmation had been scheduled. So had my marriage arrangement. The same day. The Crown Prince wanted Rosavelle Express visibly under royal supervision before the council confirmed him as heir. I looked at Elias. How long? 26 days. I had crossed the sea looking for somewhere else. Instead, I had found the deadline for taking my own kingdom back. Chapter 4. The first vote. Elias found us 3 council members willing to question his brother's fitness to inherit. We needed 5 to force a formal review. Adrian agreed to testify as a neutral witness. which made him useful precisely because he was not Octavia, Thessa, or anyone employed by Rosavelle Express. He could confirm Lilia's confession, the Crown Prince's interference, and the fact that I had never agreed to marry Draven. Our first real target was Minister Vale, respected, cautious, and influential enough to bring 2 undecided votes with him. I prepared the way I always did. Voting history, merchant interests, regional disputes, every public disagreement Vale had ever had with the Crown. Octavia helped me narrow the legal argument until I could answer every objection before he raised it. For the first time since Lilia gained the system, I felt ahead again. Then Vale received us with Lilia already sitting beside him. She had somehow learned that his youngest daughter was facing a private medical crisis and arranged specialist medicine before his own staff secured it. Vale thanked us politely. Then he praised Lilia's compassion, discretion, and remarkable instinct for the needs of others. By afternoon, he publicly supported the Crown Prince and called Lilia a woman with the temperament of a future queen. We lost the vote. Outside the chamber, Lilia stopped beside me. "You look surprised, sister." I kept my expression still. "I'm adapting." Her smile sharpened. "You used to be better prepared." That was when I understood the reversal completely. Before, I had known where the knife would fall. Now she did. The Crown did not stop with politics. Draven continued visiting Rosavelle Express under the excuse of observing essential infrastructure. He asked Nova for strategic route ledgers and internal financial records. She refused, politely. Draven reminded her that after the marriage, staffing arrangements could be reviewed. Nova looked him straight in the eye. "Then I suppose you should wait until after the marriage," when she told me later. I nearly promoted her again, despite there being nowhere left to promote her to. Elias found something more useful that evening. A sealed palace order dated before Lilia's hearing instructed court officials to prepare an independent review and secure the evidence regardless of the verdict. The Crown Prince had planned to stop her sentence before he entered the courtroom. I copied it immediately. One copy stayed with Octavia. Another went into Rosavelle's foreign mail route. A third was sent toward the neighboring Queen's archive. I was finally learning not to trust any truth that existed in only one room. The next morning, Elias returned pale. The order was still in the palace archive. Same seal, same registration number, same clerk marks, different wording. The instruction to secure the evidence before the verdict was gone. Now it merely requested standard review procedures after concerns had been raised. I compared it with my copy 3 times. Octavia checked the seals herself. "This is the same document," she said. "It cannot be." And yet, the system had not destroyed evidence. It had rewritten the official version. That frightened me more than I wanted to admit. If the system could change royal records, then documents were no longer neutral ground. Every case we built could vanish overnight. I spent hours comparing dates and copies until the letters blurred. Octavia finally took the page out of my hand. Enough. It changed evidence. I know. I don't know what it can change next. My voice came out quieter. I don't know what happens next anymore. Octavia watched me. "Because this is where your knowledge ended." I looked at her. She waited. I had promised her the truth. Mira was my name before I became Sabina. I told her enough. Another world. A game where Sabina Rosavelle was supposed to die. Lilia was the heroine. I had known the story only until the ballroom, because that was where Sabina's route ended. And now Lilia has the system. I finished. Whatever advantage I had, she has it now. Octavia was quiet for several seconds. "Do you believe me?" "I believe you are Mira." Something in my chest tightened. "The rest may take longer." That was fair. Octavia set the papers aside. "Mira," I looked at her. "I cannot promise this works. I did not ask you to. I cannot promise I win." Her expression softened. "I did not stay because you always win." That stopped me. For months I had treated certainty like rent I owed everyone around me. If I had a plan, I deserved their trust. If I knew the future, I could protect them. Octavia leaned closer. "You do not have to earn the right to be frightened." I kissed her before I could find a sensible reply. This time there was no rain, no courtroom waiting nearby, no reason to stop. Octavia's hand slid into my hair, and mine found the edge of her coat. Somewhere in the back of my mind, Thessa appeared with terrible timing. I had kissed her too. Octavia and I had still never discussed what we were, or what either of us expected. My conscience attempted to begin another negotiation. I ignored it for once. When Octavia pulled me closer, the document slid forgotten onto the floor. Morning arrived with Octavia in my bed, her hair slightly disordered and a succession law volume open across her knees. I stared at her. "Are you working?" "Yes." "In my bed?" She turned a page. "The law remains objectionable regardless of location." I should have been offended. Instead, I found it unfairly attractive. Then I remembered Thessa again and felt the beginning of a problem I had absolutely no intention of examining before breakfast. A knock came at the outer door. Thessa entered carrying a sealed packet, took one look at Octavia, then at me. Her eyebrow rose. "Should I come back after breakfast?" "No," I said too quickly. Octavia continued reading as if pirate captains routinely entered bedrooms with evidence. Thessa's smile widened, but she handed me the packet. Foreign Port Archive. Rosavelle copied the royal order before someone decided history needed editing. I opened it. The original wording was still there. Same date. Same seal. Same instruction issued before Lilia's hearing. The palace copy had changed. The foreign one had not. For the first time since Lilia gained the system. I smiled. It could rewrite a royal record. It could not rewrite every copy carried by Rosavelle Express. Chapter 5. The Perfect Heroine. After the palace record changed, I stopped trusting any truth that existed in only one place.
Rosavelle Express began carrying copies of succession evidence alongside ordinary cargo.
One set went to foreign ports, another to independent merchants. The neighboring queen kept sealed copies under her own authority. Elias did the same inside the palace. If the system wanted to rewrite history, it was going to need better logistics than mine. The first plague reports arrived 4 days later, fever in 2 eastern towns. Then another. At first, physicians called it worrying rather than catastrophic. What bothered me was the medicine market. Nova reported that several common treatments were already difficult to source before demand had properly risen. Pharmacies in 3 cities were rationing stock. 2 hospitals estimated they had less than 3 days left. Rosavelle buyers searched every supplier we knew. The answer kept coming back the same. Sold out, already purchased. No stock available. Then Lilia saved everyone. Wagons entered the capital under royal escort carrying medicine, preserved food, clean linen, alcohol, and bottled water. Lilia rode at the front beside the crown prince while people cheered from the streets. The official announcement said she had noticed unusual fever reports weeks earlier and quietly searched abroad for supplies rather than cause panic over an unconfirmed outbreak. She had prepared when everyone else had waited. Hospitals received new stock before their shelves emptied. The story was almost perfect. Minister Vale praised her publicly that afternoon. Compassion, discretion, remarkable instinct for the needs of others. I stood in Nova's office reading the announcement and felt something cold move through me. Vale had used those exact words before. Lilia had known about his daughter before anyone else. Now she had known about a plague before the physicians did. It was not instinct. She simply knew what happened next. So had I once. Pale blue light flickered across my vision. Heroine, true ending progressing. The window vanished. I stared at the empty air. The game approved. Or at least, it believed Lilia was still following the route it wanted. That evening, I pulled every purchasing record Rosavelle could access. If Lilia had truly searched abroad after hearing early reports, the dates should support her story. Some did. Several foreign purchases had been arranged recently. Others had not. Large medicine orders had disappeared from domestic warehouses almost 3 weeks before the first recognized outbreak. Preserved grain, clean linen, medical alcohol, fever remedies. Different buyers, different names. The pattern only appeared once I placed the dates together. Lucian arrived the following morning looking like a man who had discovered humiliation could become a lifestyle. I considered having him removed until he placed a merchant code on my desk. "I know this one," he said. "Lilia used the same intermediary before." I looked at him. Useful is not the same as forgiven. His jaw tightened. I know, that was the first sensible thing he had said to me in months. The code connected 3 supposedly independent buyers to the same purchasing agent. Several of those shipments had passed through coastal storage, so I joined Thessa aboard the Nightwake. She took one look at the manifests and stopped joking. A crate listed as foreign medicine had entered one port before the plague, been transferred to private storage, then appeared weeks later under a different manifest as imported emergency stock. Another shipment supposedly arriving from overseas had never crossed the sea at all. "This ship could not have made that route," Thessa said. "Wrong tide. Wrong departure time. Also, I know the captain. He lies better than this." Elias traced the money from the other end. Crown-controlled funds had reached the same intermediaries before the outbreak became public. The prince had not merely supported Lilia after she found medicine. He had financed the purchases in advance. By evening, the shape of it was clear. Lilia had learned a plague was coming. She warned the crown prince. Together, they bought medicine and food before ordinary merchants knew demand would rise. When the plague hit, The market had less reserve than anyone realized. They had not caused the disease. They had helped create the shortage. Hospitals began running low earlier, because so much stock had already vanished into private warehouses. Then, at exactly the moment panic began, Lilia appeared with wagons of supplies and a story about searching abroad. Some of the medicine really was foreign. Enough to make the lie believable. The rest had been sitting inside the kingdom all along, waiting to become miraculous. I stared at the timeline until Thessa took the papers away from me. You are doing it again. Doing what? Trying to glare numbers into confessing. They deserve it. She leaned against the cabin table. Outside, the sea struck softly against the hull. For once, Thessa did not smile immediately. You know what worries me about Vindex? I looked up. That sentence has many possible endings. She makes sense beside you. My amusement faded. Thessa looked toward the window. She knows your laws, your nobles, your politics. She can stand beside you at court, without someone threatening to hang her before lunch. You managed court. Reasonably well. I threatened nobody. You looked disappointed about that. A small smile appeared, then vanished. I know what women like you usually choose when the adventure ends. There it was. Not jealousy disguised as teasing. Fear. I stood. What exactly are women like me? Women with something worth protecting. And you think you are not? Thessa shrugged, but not convincingly. I am very good when someone needs a ship, a sword, or somewhere to disappear. I stepped closer. You are not where I go when I want to escape my life. Her eyes met mine. Good. You are part of it. For once, Thessa had no clever answer, so I kissed her. She froze for half a heartbeat. Then one hand caught the back of my neck, and the other closed around my waist, pulling me hard against her. Whatever restraint she had been pretending to possess disappeared. Thessa kissed me back like she had been waiting for permission, and had no intention of wasting it. I barely had time to breathe before she turned us, pressing me against the edge of the cabin table. I laughed against her mouth. That confident? You kissed me first. That is your defense? It is an excellent defense. She kissed me again before I could argue. Later, much later, I remembered there had been paperwork on that table. Morning found me in Thessa's cabin with her arm across my waist, her hair everywhere, and most of the blankets somehow on her side. I tried to pull some back. Her arm tightened. You steal blankets. I commandeer resources. That is piracy. Only if you complain to the authorities. I looked at her for a moment. Thessa. Her smile faded slightly. That tone usually means paperwork or disaster. Mira wasn't just another name. She waited. So I told her. Not every detail. Just enough. Another world, a game. Sabina Rosavelle was supposed to die. Lilia was the heroine. I had known what would happen only until Sabina's death. And now Lilia had the system instead. Thessa stared at me. You're serious. Unfortunately, she was quiet long enough that I started regretting everything. Then she said, You came from another world and still decided to become a merchant. I blinked. That is your response? I'm working through it. Her hand found mine beneath the blanket. You're still Mira. Something in my chest loosened. Although this does explain several things. Such as your deeply unhealthy relationship with paperwork. I turned my head toward her. Then I thought of Octavia. There was the problem again. Except it was no longer a problem I could dismiss as two badly timed kisses. I cared about both of them. I had woken beside both of them. At some point I was going to have to decide what that meant. Nova's message arrived before breakfast ended. One of Rosavelle's coastal managers had located the original purchase ledgers from the private warehouse. Thessa and I collected them before royal officials knew they existed. Domestic orders, false re-export papers, crown-linked payments, storage fees paid weeks before the first plague report, enough evidence to reconstruct almost the entire operation. The final document was a distribution schedule. Lilia's relief wagons had been organized before the hospitals announced they were close to running out. Locations selected, routes assigned, public notices prepared. She had not been scrambling to find medicine. She had been preparing an entrance. I laid the papers in order across the table. Lilia had known the plague was coming. She had bought supplies before anyone else could prepare. Her purchases helped empty the market faster. Then, she returned those same supplies when everyone was desperate enough to call her a hero. Minister Vale had called it remarkable instinct. The system called it the true ending. I called it what it was. Lilia had not arrived at the perfect moment. She had helped create it. Chapter 6. The Royal Seizure. We returned from the coast with enough evidence to frighten a prince, advance purchases, false import records, crown-linked payments, warehouse transfers, relief schedules prepared before hospitals began running low. Elias believed we were one vote away from forcing a formal succession review. Adrian was ready to testify. The neighboring queen held copies outside the kingdom. For the first time since Lilia gained the system, I thought we might actually be ahead. We were not. One of Elias's undecided counselors broke before noon. He went directly to the crown prince and reported the succession challenge, the foreign evidence, and the names of everyone considering support. Elias was placed under palace restriction before he could reach the council chamber. Officially, he was not arrested. He was merely confined for his own protection while accusations of conspiracy were investigated. Apparently, treason sounded more respectable when served with tea. House Vindex received its own order. Octavia was instructed to withdraw from Rosavelle affairs and return home until the investigation ended. She read the letter once, folded it neatly, and placed it beside my breakfast. No, I looked at her. That is your legal analysis? Yes. Thessa's situation was less elegant. Blackwake's pardon was suspended under suspicion of smuggling medical supplies during the plague. Royal harbors were closed to her ships. If guards found her inside the capital, they could arrest her. Then soldiers arrived at Rosavelle Express. By the time I reached the warehouse, royal seals covered my office doors. Employees had been pushed back from the record rooms. Draven stood beside the main dispatch desk with an emergency administration order in his hand. For weeks he had been allowed to observe, request, and irritate. Now the Crown Prince had finally given him authority. Rosavelle Express remained legally mine. Operational control, however, had been transferred temporarily to the Crown for the duration of the national emergency. Nova stood between Draven and the root office. I require the internal ledgers, security codes, and private dispatch network, he said. You have the records listed in the order. I require the rest. They are not listed. Draven's expression barely changed. Your position is now under royal administration, Nova nodded. Then administer what you legally possess. I almost smiled. Draven did not. He dismissed her on the spot. Nova removed her warehouse badge, crossed the floor, and placed it in my palm. Her fingers closed around mine for 1 second. The warehouse is a building, she said quietly. The roots are already moving. Then she walked out before anyone could stop her. That was when I understood what she had done. Copies, supplier lists, contact trees, emergency seals. The network we had spent weeks spreading beyond the capital was already active. Draven had taken the desks, the accounts, the official stamps, and my chair. He had not taken Rosavelle Express. Not all of it. Still, watching him sit behind my desk made me want to commit several crimes that Octavia would probably insist on classifying individually. Draven asked to speak privately. This does not need to become worse, he said. Accept the marriage. End your support for Prince Elias. Publicly separate Rosavelle from Captain Blackwake and House Vindex. The company can be returned to you under joint administration. Your employees retain their positions. Charges against your associates may be reconsidered. You want me to condemn Thessa. I want you to protect everyone else. And Octavia? Lady Vindex need only return to her family. He genuinely believed he was offering mercy. That made it harder to dismiss. For one terrible moment I imagined signing, Nova back at work. Employees paid. Thessa spared execution. Octavia no longer accused of treason. Elias abandoned perhaps, but alive. All it would cost was me. The Crown summoned father that afternoon. As head of House Rosavelle, his signature would strengthen the marriage arrangement and make my refusal easier to override. I expected hesitation. I had seen it before. Instead, father looked at the document and pushed it back. No. The Crown Prince's representative stared at him. Father's hands trembled, but his voice did not. Rosavelle Express belongs to Sabina. I neglected what was hers once. I will not sign it into another man's control. He did not look at me after saying it. I did not forgive him, but for the first time, he had chosen me before the house. That mattered. The neighboring queen's message arrived before sunset. Sanctuary remained available. She could place me under diplomatic protection immediately. Octavia could come. Nova and selected staff could cross under commercial protection. Thessa had access to safe harbor. Foreign Rosavelle assets were already secured. I read the offer twice. This time I almost accepted. My company was occupied. Elias was trapped. Thessa was wanted. Octavia had placed House Vindex at risk simply by standing beside me. Every decision I made seemed to drag someone else deeper into danger. Maybe leaving was not cowardice. Maybe staying had simply become selfish. Then I thought about everyone who would remain. Warehouse workers without royal friends. drivers in inland towns, merchants who had built their businesses around our routes, physicians still moving plague medicine through whatever channels remained open. I could leave. They could not. I'm staying, I said. Octavia did not argue. Thessa only looked at me for a moment. Of course you are. We regrouped that night in a foreign merchant residence protected by the neighboring Queen's seal. Nova arrived through the service entrance. Thessa came through a window despite there being a perfectly functional door. Octavia was already at the table with enough legal documents to start a small fire. I looked at both women and realized there was one problem I had successfully avoided through poisonings: coups, trade disputes, and plague investigations. I need to tell you something. Thessa leaned back. That sentence never ends well. I thought I had to choose. Silence. Octavia looked at me. Thessa blinked. Choose what? One of you. Another silence. Then Thessa looked at Octavia. Octavia looked at Thessa. Thessa looked back at me. Why? I suddenly regretted every decision that had brought me to this room. Where I came from, marrying both of you would not normally be an option. Thessa's expression changed. Your world. Yes. She stared at me for 2 seconds longer. Then she started laughing. This is not funny. You have been walking around looking guilty every time someone kisses you, because you thought you were committing some kind of romantic crime? I did not look guilty. Octavia raised one eyebrow. Traitor. The law does not require you to choose one of us, Octavia said. Relief hit too quickly. Then she continued. That does not mean the law decides what we want. The relief stopped. Fair. Thessa's amusement faded. She's right. Octavia looked toward her. And jealousy does exist. Thessa smiled again. I noticed. You deliberately put your hand on Mira's waist whenever I was looking. Not every time. Most times. I stared between them. You both knew? Thessa shrugged. Vindex is terrible at hiding jealousy. Octavia's expression became dangerously calm. You thought I was going to choose her, I said to Thessa. Her smile softened, sometimes. And you were jealous of her. Octavia folded her hands, occasionally. This was somehow worse than fighting the crown. I took a breath. I don't want one of you as the life I build and the other as the place I escape to. Neither interrupted. I want both of you, not secretly, not one above the other, but only if both of you actually want that. Octavia looked at Thessa. Thessa looked back. No joke this time. Finally, Octavia said, Then we discuss boundaries. Thessa groaned. Of course you have a contract. I have principles. You have clauses. She does have clauses, I said. Octavia ignored us. No romantic punishment through business decisions. No using Rosavelle authority against one another. Jealousy was spoken instead of turned into warfare. Nobody made unilateral sacrifices and called it protection. Thessa added one condition. Mira is forbidden from offering herself in marriage to save everyone without consulting us. I opened my mouth. Both women looked at me. I closed it again. Pale blue light suddenly appeared across my vision. Original route conditions no longer valid. Another line formed beneath it, ending classification. Unstable. Then the window disappeared. Thessa watched my face. System? I nodded. Octavia looked almost satisfied. Apparently. Even the game finds your relationship decisions difficult to organize. Thank you. Nova interrupted before Thessa could make that worse. The ceremony moved. I turned. What ceremony? The succession confirmation. Stomach tightened. Nova placed 3 notices on the table. The Crown Prince's confirmation as heir. Lilia's formal presentation beside him. The royal ratification of my marriage arrangement with Draven. All scheduled together. The Crown wants Rosavelle under royal administration before the succession vote, Octavia said. They want my marriage to look like support. Nova nodded. When? She looked at me. Tomorrow. Nova tapped the final notice. The emergency administration order allows the Crown to accelerate the ratification hearing. The room went silent. No time to rebuild the company. No time to gather better evidence. Nova placed another message beside the notices. Minister Vale. I looked at her. He wants to see the plague records. All of them. Elias had needed 5 votes. Apparently, Lilia's perfect heroine act had finally made one person curious enough to count the receipts. Everything we had already collected would have to be enough. They had taken my company, confined my ally, outlawed my lover, and scheduled my marriage. By tomorrow night, either the Crown Prince would own the ending, or we would break it first. Chapter 7. Our ending. The palace called it a succession ceremony. It looked more like a public execution with better flowers. The crown prince would be confirmed as heir. Lilia would be presented beside him as the woman who had helped save the kingdom during the plague. And the crown intended to ratify my marriage arrangement with Draven. With Rosavelle Express already under royal administration, and everyone I cared about under threat, they were not pretending I had no choice. They had simply made every other choice expensive. Draven stood beside the ceremonial table, calm as ever. Lilia wore white and gold. The crown prince looked like a man already imagining himself on the throne. I entered with Octavia beside me. Thessa was nowhere visible, which was probably the only reason half the guards were still breathing normally. Lilia smiled. Before this proceeds, perhaps the council should understand what Lady Rosavelle has been hiding. Of course, she spoke about Octavia, House Vindex influence, then Thessa. Blackwake ships, Rosavelle Express, she claimed, now sat at the center of a private alliance capable of moving money, supplies, information, and armed vessels without royal control. I let her finish. Lady Vindex and Captain Blackwake are both part of my life. Whispers spread through the hall. Lilia's smile faltered. You admit it? You were hoping I would be embarrassed? The crown prince stepped forward. Your private relationships do not alter the marriage arrangement. You have been given every opportunity to accept a lawful resolution. You mean every opportunity to accept after you seized my company, confined Elias, threatened Octavia, and revoked Thessa's pardon. The hall quieted. That is not consent. Father rose from the Rosavelle seats. And House Rosavelle will not ratify it. The crown prince turned toward him. Your house has obligations to the crown. Father's hands trembled. So does the crown to its people. Before the prince could answer, the doors opened. Elias entered under guard. 5 counselors rose with him. I invoke formal succession review. The room erupted. The king sat above the chamber, pale beneath heavy robes. Illness had kept him from daily government for months, leaving most authority in his heir's hands. But succession law still belonged to the crown and council together. The king lifted one hand. The review will be heard. For the first time, the crown prince stopped looking certain. On what evidence? I smiled. That is the convenient part. Rosavelle couriers entered through 3 doors at once. Packets went to counselors, merchants, physicians, foreign envoys, and the king's legal officers. You may confiscate 1 copy, I said. Perhaps 10. I looked around the chamber. You cannot confiscate all of them. The neighboring queen's envoy produced the original order issued before Lilia's sentencing. Her archive had received it before. The palace version changed. Same seal, same registration, different wording. The original instructed officials to prepare Lilia's review before the court had even delivered its sentence. Palace copy no longer did. Adrian confirmed the original case independently. Lilia had confessed. The evidence had existed before the crown prince intervened. I had not controlled the court. Then Nova stepped forward with the plague records, medicine, preserved food, clean linen, medical alcohol, large purchases made weeks before the recognized outbreak, spread across supposedly unrelated buyers. Lucian identified the intermediary code. I saw it before, he said. Lilia used the same network during her earlier schemes. Lilia turned on him. You would say anything now. Lucian looked at her. I almost killed Sabina because I believed you. Then he sat. Nova laid out the shipping records. Several of Lilia's supposed foreign emergency supplies had originated inside the kingdom. They were bought domestically, moved through coastal storage, relabeled, and later returned as emergency imports. That proves preparation, Lilia said. Not all of it. The side doors opened. Thessa walked in. Every guard reached for a weapon. The neighboring queen's envoy raised a sealed document. Captain Blackwake enters under foreign diplomatic protection. Thessa smiled at the guards. Disappointing. I know. She dropped a stack of harbor records beside Nova's ledgers. Several ships named in the emergency import documents could not have completed the routes claimed. Wrong tides, wrong departure times. Elias added the final link. Crown-controlled funds had paid the intermediaries. Before the plague became public, the Crown Prince had financed the purchases. I arranged the records in order. 3 weeks before the first recognized outbreak, medicine and food began disappearing from the market. The purchase orders. Then the plague arrived. The hospital reports. Demand rose. Pharmacies began running low. Hospitals warned they had only days of supply remaining. then Lilia's relief schedule. Finally, Lady Lilia arrived with exactly what everyone needed. Lilia lifted her chin. Because I prepared. Yes. She blinked. You prepared before anyone else knew they needed to. That is called foresight. And your purchases reduced the supply everyone else had available. You cannot blame me because other merchants failed to prepare. I'm not. I placed the false import records beside the domestic warehouse ledgers. I'm blaming you for buying domestic stock through intermediaries, hiding where it came from, then presenting it as medicine you miraculously found abroad. The room went still. People were saved, Lilia said. Yes, then what exactly are you accusing me of? I pushed the relief schedule toward her. The wagons had been assigned before hospitals announced they were close to running out. Distribution points chosen. Public notices prepared. You knew what was coming. You could have warned physicians, merchants, hospitals, anyone. Her face hardened. Instead, you bought first. Everyone else discovered the shortage second. Then you arrived third. And people lived because I did. People nearly ran out because you did. The Crown Prince stepped forward. Enough. Lady Lilia's preparation prevented disaster. Elias faced him. You financed the purchases to ensure supply. You disguised where the medicine came from to prevent panic. You used the crisis to justify seizing Rosavelle Express. I protected the kingdom. Elias's voice stayed calm. A ruler who creates the crisis he promises to solve is not protecting anyone. Lilia laughed. Not softly this time. She looked directly at me. Why do you always take my happy ending? The rest of the hall stopped mattering. Why do you want me dead so badly? Her face twisted. Because you were born with everything. The Rosavelle name, the estate, the money. Everyone looked at you first. Without Rosavelle, you are nothing. I stared at her. So are you. Stepsister. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. You hated me for having what you wanted. You already had everything. So I should have died? It was supposed to be mine. There it was. Not a confession. Entitlement. You wanted my happy ending so badly, I said. You never bothered making one of your own. The vote came quickly after that. The Crown Prince was removed from succession pending trial and stripped of command authority. Elias was confirmed as heir. Lilia's royal protection ended with the vote. Her original attempted murder case reopened alongside charges connected to the plague scheme and falsified commercial records. She protested as the guards took her. Nobody stopped them this time. Draven watched her leave, then looked at me. It appears the arrangement is void. You noticed. He inclined his head and walked away. For once, he left Rosavelle without trying to inspect anything. Elias signed the independent charter before sunset. No unilateral royal seizure. No company control through marriage. Emergency intervention required council review. International contracts remained protected. The restrictions applied to future heirs, too. I made him read that clause twice. You are enjoying this? He said. A little. Pale blue light appeared across my vision. Heroine true ending failed. Original root conditions invalid. Then, final ending classification required. 2 names appeared. Octavia Vindex, Thessa Blackwake. I stared at them. After everything, the game still wanted me to choose one of its roots. No, invalid selection. That sounds like your problem. The window flickered. Ending classification unavailable. Octavia came to one side of me. Thessa took the other. I reached for both their hands. The system flashed once more. System authority terminated. Then it disappeared. Nothing replaced it. No route. No confirmation. No instruction. Telling me whether I had chosen correctly. Good. Months later, Rosavelle Express had become harder to seize because there was no longer one center to seize. Nova ran warehouse operations. Octavia handled legal strategy whenever she could resist rewriting my contracts for pleasure. Thessa commanded the sea routes and continued insisting that urgent shipping worked better when everyone ignored at least one regulation. Elias complained regularly that the charter I made him sign was inconvenient. I considered that proof it worked. One morning, I woke with Octavia beside me and Thessa occupying most of the blanket. I pulled. Thessa tightened her grip without opening her eyes. Piracy. Resource management. Octavia opened one eye. You encouraged her. I absolutely did not. For one stupid second, I waited for pale blue light. Nothing appeared. No route. No objective. No ending notification. For the first time since I woke in Sabina Rosavelle's body, nothing told me what happened next. Good. This ending was ours.
Thank you for listening. Like, subscribe, or become a member to support Keiko Novel, then choose your next world.